about that? Good morning, everybody. Years ago, there was a book that came out called Letters to God. And they gave kids a sheet of paper in a classroom somewhere and just said, write a letter to God. So here they are, big crayons and all that, and then they published a book. So I hope that they'll be up on the screen. So I'll read a few of them that I just clipped out, not very many. Dear God, I learned in school that you make butterflies out of caterpillars. What can you do for my sister? She's ugly. Dear God, what's your best sport? Mine is basketball. I like the Pistons, but I guess you don't because they don't win much. Do you get ESPN up there? Dear God, I wonder if you could help me out. My mom and dad said I can't watch TV for a week, so I guess I'm going to miss all those religious shows, unless you do something. Dear God, instead of letting people die and having to make new ones, why don't you just keep the ones you have now? Dear God, my family and me went to Germany last summer. We stopped at those camp places where a lot of people died. My question is, did you know about this? Were you away then? And finally, to set up this message today, dear God, I'm writing to complain about how men get the biggest say in everything. I want this to stop now. I want to be president someday, and things are going to change. We're going to need a tornado or a hurricane or something. I will let you know. Linda, age 11. Where do these kids get these pictures of God? You know? They get it from somewhere. They get it from church, pastor, school, parents, somewhere. And these pictures come down, and that's what we want to wrestle with a little bit today. Little drama at La Sierra this week. Some of you may have been involved or know about it. I'm tangential to it. I teach one class, but my wife's faculty, and we live close by. Son is going. So I don't know if you know what Title IX is. It's been a law around for 40 years, 45 years. But over the last few years, Title IX has added this thing about fighting sexual harassment and sex abuse on campus. And so there's usually a Title IX coordinator. And if a girl has a story and something happens, and can call the Title IX coordinator, and there's an investigation, and you treat them with safety and respect and try to work it all out. And we have one, but evidently a couple cases hadn't worked out the way as quickly as it should have happened maybe. So there was demonstration and petitions, and then there was a big town hall meeting Thursday night, and I went to it just before I taught my class. And one of the faculty administrators made a little speech to give some of the background, and just thought, why has it taken us thousands of years in the history of our world until finally here at this last point of our world, people have begun to figure out, maybe you just can't treat women like this. See? And so for thousands of years, women they were like property. They couldn't vote. They couldn't own property. They had to marry who their parents told them they had to marry. In my lifetime, they've begun to change some of these things. It's taken them that long. In my lifetime, our church finally lost a lawsuit and had to go to equal pay for equal work. In my lifetime, finally women can be doctors or airline pilots or whatever they really want to do. And in my lifetime, we are still trying to figure out if it's okay to have women be equal in ministry or not. Thousands of years. For hundreds of years, they've married Indian girls off at 12, 13 years old against their choice. Arranged marriages. Still selling girls in my home country of Thailand. In Boko Haram, they can take 300 girls and take them off into the jungle with all of our satellites and trillions of dollars of military hardware. We can't find where those girls are and somehow rescue them from these people. Girls and women. A girl in Pakistan decides that it's okay for her to go to school and stands up for that and a guy walks onto her school bus and shoots her in the head. 1/3 of every girl in our country has some form of abuse happen to them in their lifetime. And there are still countries today where women cannot drive, they cannot go outside of the house unless they have a man with them. And there's a religion that at least many believe is that if you die doing something great for Allah, you go straight to heaven and there'll be 72 girls waiting there for you. Women, you get the one, your husband. But the men get the 72 girls. And it's in the book. This is what it says. And many are beginning to wonder if somehow maybe all of this is rooted in our picture of God. That somehow we have the idea that God is male, and therefore it's in the heart of God that men are to be bigger and stronger and more capable and smarter, and they are to be the leaders, and they're to be in charge, and the priests of the home. And women are to be some more supportive, submissive, to be second tier. And that's the way God designed it to be. It's in God's heart for this. And they asked me to speak today on the feminine side of God on Mother's Day weekend. And so we want to say very clearly, God is not just male in the Bible. There's a number of texts I think are crystal clear. But let's start right at the very beginning where it says, let us make man in our image. And it says, in the image of God, he created them, male and female created them. In the image of God. God is not sexual. He is the totality of all the male traits and all the female traits. He is all of it all together. And it takes both men and women in order to be the image of God. Amen? From the very beginning. That's what it says. C.S. Lewis says that when we walk into heaven and we see Jesus for the first time, we will recognize all of our favorite people in the face of Jesus. We will have seen them before. Only men? I don't think so. Some could say maybe mostly women that you will see in the face of Jesus, created in the image of God. There's like a top 10 list, I can't bring them all to you today, of texts that seem to indicate the female side of God. So we'll put a few of them up on the screen quickly. Deuteronomy 32:11, like an eagle that hovers over her young, so he spreads his wings to take them up. In verse 18, you forgot the God who had given you birth. Isaiah 66, verse 13, I will comfort you there as a mother comforts her child. Isaiah 42:14, I have long been silent, but like a woman in labor, I will cry and groan. And then in Luke 15, same chapter with the prodigal son, there's a story of the woman who goes out to look for the lost coin. Represents God. And then probably the one that is my favorite and one of the most important to me that we want to at least look at for a moment today. Jesus is standing over Jerusalem. He has just said some terrible things about them. And then he says this. Let me go back to the text. O Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones the messengers. How often I have wanted to gather you as a hen protects her chicks beneath her wings, but you wouldn't let me. Here God is not using sort of the male traits of strength and power and force, but this is the feminine side, he says. Even though you have done terrible things to people, you are snakes in the grass and vipers. He said, how often I've wanted you to draw you under my wings. So we have love and forgiveness and mercy and protection, nurturing, all female sides of God. All we have about God are what are called metaphors. The prophets would have an experience of God and they would come back and say, I can't tell you exactly what he's like, but he's something like this. And they would look at something in the world and they would say, he's like that. He's like a father. And then the fatherhood shape of God would come into your mind. Or he's like a king, or he's like a good shepherd, or he's like a rock. And here in these texts, God adds the idea of being a woman and a mother. And if you don't include that in your picture of God, you have cheated your picture of God. God's picture is distorted and incomplete because you only have this one side of God and not the other side. See? And God is hoping that somehow you will take the male side and add in the female side. That you will not just see him and relate to him as the God with the male thundering on top of Mount Sinai, or shouting and thunder and smoke and all of that, and commandments. But that you will also have the Song of Solomon. You can't even read really most of it in public. It's sexy and it's racy. And it has this wonderful picture. It says, I went looking for you. All night long I looked. I will get up and go all over the city. I will search for the one my heart loves. It's talking about God. And he doesn't want you to just think about him with the Mount Sinai. He wants you to think about him with the Song of Solomon. It's also part of the great picture of God, male and female. And he hopes you won't just stop with the prodigal son and the father, who you can always go home to the father, but he hopes you will add all the great women of the Bible. And Sarah and Esther and all the others. And Miriam, who goes down to the water. She doesn't want her son to die. And she takes her little boy and she puts him in a little bulrush and puts him out there and takes a risk. A mother, hoping that her child will stay alive. She says, that's also part of who I am. And he hopes that you'll take your mother and go from your mother and the best of who she is to God. Tony asked that maybe I'd say something about my own mother. She was here last week. She can't be here. We have 3 of us, our pastors, so she had another one of ours today. She's at Nathan's father's church. My mother turns 87 this week. And she's terrific. But one of these days, there will be a funeral. And the 4 of us will stand, and each of us have a few minutes to talk about my mother. What will I tell? So I don't know, some of these, I'm the only one that remembers because I'm the oldest. We went to Thailand. We rode a train. I was 4 years old. We rode a train all night up to this city. We don't know the language. A couple people are with us. They rent us this little dump of a house that had no cupboards, no nothing, only cold water. We took showers, bathed out by the well hundreds of times. No kitchen inside the house. And my mother, 28 years old, has told me how there was a bunch of wooden crates. That's how they shipped it back then, wooden crates in the front yard. 3 little boys. I'm 4, 2, and 5 months. And my mother knew she had about 2 hours to get water or we were going to be in trouble. There's no bottled water been invented yet. And my mother had to figure out which box had the stove in it and somehow rip open that wood box, get the stove, set it up, find the kerosene, get a fire started, get a pot, and boil water in a couple hours because we were going to be in trouble if we couldn't get water. That's a mother. Maybe I'll tell about the time we came home from Thailand. I'd been in high school in Singapore. I'm 17. We went to church for the first time in New Jersey that first Sabbath after being gone for years. Fashion came out to Singapore a little slow. And we're dressed in our white shirts and a thin, skinny little black tie and skin-tight black pants that stopped up at the top of white socks. That's how you had to dress when I went to high school. And we walked into a church where everybody was wearing pink shirts and purple shirts and yellow shirts and big fat paisley ties and bell-bottom pants. And we were just behind. And we went home and we said, we're not going to church until we have different clothes. And my mother had no money to go buy all new clothes for us. But I remember her going to a store and buying paisley and pink, purple polka cloth. And she stayed up all night and cut and sewed ties so we could at least wear big fat ties to church. And not look stupid. And maybe I'll tell about my mother getting on a train in Bangkok and going for 2 days and 2 nights to come down to Singapore to see her boys. And writing letters to us every week, all the years, high school. I was in college, they were there, and we were here. And even now, 60-some years old, every time we come home, she makes all of our favorite desserts. She's a mother. And God is hoping that on Mother's Day, when you think about your mother and the best of your mother, that you will extrapolate up to God, that He is not just male, but He's also a mother. Amen? The best of your mom. What does all this mean? I just put together a few little random implications of what it means if God is really woman and feminine also. I'll just start with one. It means the cross. The cross was not an angry God killing Jesus in our place. You think about Mary as the mother of God. She brings this little baby and she raises him to be God. And then she has to stand there and watch while he's whipped and nails and watch him slammed into the ground and up on a cross and stand there as his mother and watch that. And the famous picture of Mary wiping the blood in the movie. And it's not just Jesus who was a picture of God. If God is feminine, then Mary is also, as the mother of God, a picture of who God is. And how can you have the mother wiping up the blood and the father is the one in traditional Christianity? God is the one who hates sin and death has to be the penalty, and God takes the wrath that should be poured on us and He pours it on Jesus instead. So you have God, the Father, killing you and the mother wiping up the blood. You cannot. They both have the same picture of God, of nurturing and love and kindness and goodness and life-giving. That's all they are. And you cannot have two mixed pictures of God. And we need the mother picture to balance it all out. I've had two different Catholic people ask me this week, Pastor Dan, what about this praying to Mary in order to get God to do stuff? No, you cannot. Because if God is feminine and Mary represents the picture of God, then their heart is the same. You don't have to go through one in order to soften up the heart of the other. They are together in what they believe. And number 3, roles and equality. If the male and female are absolutely equal in the heart of God, of who God is, then it is in the heart of God for us to live in equality down here. And it never has been in the heart of God to have one group of people somehow be in the dominant position and be the leaders and the rulers and the strong people and in charge of everything, while another group has to always be in second place and always take the crumbs that are left over and always be. It is not in the heart of God. And my side of the church believes that except for bringing a child into the world, roles should not be decided by something that you have no control over, by your gender or by your looks or something else. But your roles in marriage and family and work and church should be decided by your gifts and your talents and your interests and what you're good at and what you like to do and who is closest and who has the time. That's how you decide. And no one pulls rank and says, this is my role because I am this. And you had nothing to do with that yourself. And every young girl has a chance to be whatever they want. There was no one that can come and say, no, girls can't do that. No, you cannot. You have a right to be anything you are capable of doing. And you are judged by your experience and by your talent and your accomplishments and not by your gender or how you look or something you have nothing to do with. And it is something that we give those of us who have been in the dominant or in the ascendant position. We give the gift of equality because of the heart of God. Story I used in the women's ordination debate 20 years ago. There were two people in the Olympics that were skating in the skiing and the cross-country skiing. And after 50 kilometers of racing against each other, one ski tip went over the line like a quarter of an inch ahead of another one. They had to have cameras and pictures and finally decide this one got the gold medal and this one got the silver. Quarter of an inch after 50 kilometers. And the one who got the gold medal went and got the one with the silver and said, give me your medal. And he went to somebody and they broke those two in half and they put gold and silver together. And he said, we are equal. There's no longer gold and silver. We are equal. And that's what we do because of God. We give each other equality. And I'm going to take a stand for social justice. If anything, our campus now is learning I think they did a lot of good things right, but not everything just exactly right. Is that there comes a time when you have to stand up, and some young people stood up this week. One girl primarily, one boy, the editor of the Criterion. They organized petitions and protests. And the faculty and administrators stood up there and said, we're sorry for any mistakes we have made. We want to get this right. And any girl that comes to us that has had a bad experience where something happened that should not have happened, you call us and you come into our office. We will take it seriously. It is no longer innocent until proven guilty in the investigation. It is now we take your story as true until somebody proves that it's not true. And we do what we can to protect you and to make life safe and give you a chance to heal up. You do not have to face this person on campus every class. There's things we do, and we do it quickly. I encourage all of you to read the book Missoula. If you haven't read that yet, every girl, every parent should read this book. Guys, too. Powerful book. John Krakauer, last year, lawsuit, hear about it last week again. You have to know. And you have to stand up and say, this is not okay. Because God is male and female, and these girls are made in the image of God, and this should not happen. And it has to stop. Human trafficking, we had a whole deal here. We hope we can find more we can do about it. We are going, my brother is going to go to a church that is at a site in northern Thailand called Keeping the Girls Safe. There is a house, and they take these girls that would otherwise be in prostitution somewhere, and they give them a school, and they give them God, and they come to church, and they are wonderful young women. It's a ministry from our church in Agra, and you find some way to make a difference, to make it stand for social justice. You do the best you can to avoid stereotype. You're sitting on a committee. You don't ask the girl to be the one who takes the minutes. We don't do those things. We don't live with stereotype. We don't say, okay, we'll be out here and you go to the kitchen. No, we don't. And we're careful about pink and blue and all these other stereotypes, and girls can't do math. And we stand up and we fight against it because of our picture of God. And then finally, number 5, we honor our mothers on this weekend, who God has used to tell us what he is really like, male and female. Mothers are supposed to be part of your picture of God. They went through a certain hell to bring you into the world. If you haven't been in a room of labor and know a little bit of what that's like, I've only been in the room. Obviously, I've not experienced it. But I bow in respect to my wife, who did it twice, and all the others. And this means that you visit your mother, and it means you call her and you treat her with deep respect. I did a funeral for an old lady in my church, Indian lady, one time at La Sierra. 7 adult children, all terrific friends of mine, in their 50s and 60s, and the youngest one, I went to him and I honored him for how they cared for the mother. They put her up in the house and they honored her and they made her life easy. They were fantastic to her. And he said to me, we have no regrets. We have no regrets. Good for you. Would that we could all say that if our mother should go someday, we could look back and say, I have no regrets. I did everything I could. Go somewhere and do something for your mom tomorrow. Make her life good. And if I can say one more thing, we'll say more in the next service. The greatest gift you can give to your mother is to be a follower of Jesus and be in heaven with her for 1,000 years. Ultimately, it's all mothers care about at the end of their lives. Are my kids going to be there with me for 1,000 years? I read a lot of mother stories this week. There are stories of mothers who are heroes. Yes, there are. Mothers who held on to their kid while the kid was being swallowed by an alligator. And she reached in there and she was not going to lose this kid. And she pulled that kid out and she had alligator teeth marks on her arms for the rest of her life. You've heard these stories about the mothers who lift cars off their kids. The mother in Europe in World War II who took her kids and walked them across Europe with a string connecting them all. She was not going to lose a single one of her kids as they ran away from Nazism. And I read about mothers who have given their kidney to their daughter. Mothers who have carried a baby for their daughter. I read about a mother who came up with Lou Gehrig disease at 44. She knew she had a year or two to live and wrote a book. And she took her 14-year-old daughter to New York City, and she bought her a wedding dress because she knew there would be a wedding that she would never see. And she bought her daughter a wedding dress. Heroes. But today, I don't want to just honor mothers who are heroes, just the day-to-day moms who are really heroes. The moms who sit and make lunches for their kids and take their kids to school every day, who sit on the couch like mine did and read to our little boys every night for an hour, who make kids' rooms fantastic, who are there for their kids day after day, and take their kids to the zoo and they do their homework with them and they go through the hell of childbirth. Every mother I know swears after the first baby, I will never do that again. And somehow, a year or two later, there's another child. And they do it again and give us children. Moms who give up their career in order to raise their kids. Today and just tomorrow, I hope you'll give honor to your mom. And when you give honor to your mother, you will also go back to the God who is both male and female. And every time there's a great mom at her very best, he says, that comes from me. That's what I am really like. We had a deal in our church for a while here. We did a series on Yea God. And every week we would preach about another part of God, and then we would stand and we would shout out, Yea God. Will you do it today? Can we be Pentecostal a little bit today? Will you shout for God? Give God a hand? And I would like to encourage you to stand today and say, Yea, God, for being male and female and for giving us the gift of mothers. Would you stand on a count of three and say, Yea, God? 1, 2, 3. Yea, God. And give God a hand for being the magnificent God who is loving and nurturing and caring. He says, I'll draw you as a mother hen under her chest. God bless you.